Good evening, everybody, and thank you for joining us on another live stream. And we have a very special guest tonight. So we're joined by Jason, of course, and Tim Quilty from the Liberal Democrats Party. He's a member of Parliament down in Victoria, and possibly one of basically two people who are in Parliament that are properly pro-gun, not the fake pro-gun parties. This guy is the real deal. Very interesting guy to talk to, and he is going to give us his insight into firearms and inside the government, and people's views and his views and what he's got planned to help all of us out. So I shall bring Jason and Tim in. And before we start, please hit that subscribe button and give us a thumbs up and lay a comment. Okay.
I'm only a small screen.
Here we go. Beautiful person. Welcome, Jason, and a big thank you and welcome to Tim. Very nice to have you here.
Nice to be here.
So, just give us a bit of a rundown on yourself first, so everyone can get familiar with you.
All right, so I'm the Liberal Democrats member in the Victorian Upper House for Northern Victoria, and I was elected in November 2018. So I'm only been in Parliament for almost one term now. The election is coming up in November this year for re-election. Prior to that, I was a councillor in Wodonga Council for a period. I'm an accountant and originally a farmer. I grew up on a farm. My parents got a farm up at Adelong in southern New South Wales. And so I grew up on a farm around firearms, very comfortable with firearms, shooting. Not so much a big hunter. I've never been deer hunting or duck hunting, but always shooting rabbits and foxes and kangaroos and so on the farm as part of my childhood. There was a period there when I left the farm when I didn't have firearms or a license, but I recently, with my children getting a little older, I got my license in some firearms again because I wanted to teach them how to shoot and how to hunt and have them comfortable with firearms. So I've always been a very pro firearms person. It's been part of my life upbringing, and I think it should be a normal part of Australian culture.
So what did you enjoy shooting? What sort of firearms before the great 1996 Steelback?
So I have a lot of fond memories of going out spotlighting in the back of the truck as a 10-year-old or so on with a Ruger 1022, which is it's a lovely gun. I really miss that. It's a beautiful rifle, and it's a good thing for shooting rabbits with. We used to have a neighbour, friend of the neighbour's property who was same age, and parents would take us out spotlighting, and we'd shoot 50 or 100 rabbits in a night. And I have very fond memories of that kind of thing. My father also had a 22-250, which is the other rifle I learned to use for slightly larger animals. But I've always had a somewhat of a love for firearms, and I think that's not an unusual thing for people growing up in the country.
Yes. What just to get the other one out of the way, what's happening with the LDP name? There's probably going to be some changes. I know you don't probably know too much. You don't have to give away too much, or whatever you do know. How will that affect the obviously election coming up in May, and then obviously the Victorian election coming up November.
All right. So first of all, it doesn't. The federal government passed some rules last year to stop, basically stop Liberal Democrats using the name Liberal because the Libs didn't like it. It doesn't apply at the state level. It's only federal. So at the state level, the party remains Liberal Democrats and will for the foreseeable future. We'll see what happens federally and if we change at the state. But at the moment, for the state elections, we'll still be Lib Dems. Federally, we get because of a loophole, which some smarter people on the party exec discovered. We're going to keep the name for this election. We weren't supposed to, but by some judicious manoeuvring and putting applications in at the right time, the party it's too late to change the name before the federal election, so that the AEC will freeze the registered parties, and we still will remain the Liberal Democrats for the upcoming election in May. After that, they may try and deregister us as a party, but if so, we'll re-register under a suitable name. But if we get 2 or 3 senators elected, well, maybe they'll change the law instead, and we'll stay Liberal Democrats. We'll see. But anyway, for all events and purposes, Lib Dems will be Liberal Democrats on the ballot paper in May and also in November in Victoria.
It sounds like you're scaring them a little bit and you're getting it a bit too big and a bit too popular, and they want to try and chop you down at the knees.
Definitely. And it was interesting seeing Senate's Estimates Committee yesterday when the Libs found out that we'd keep the name. There was some very upset senators there when they were interviewing the AEC. But anyway, so it's still Lib Dems. And if we are forced to change the name, the one name was going to be Liberty Democrats and still Lib Dems. We'll see what happens in the future. But for this upcoming things, we'll still be Lib Dems. Yeah.
Now, before we read out our participants, we normally do like a roll call, Tim, sometimes throughout the show. But one question, interesting one. I mean, I would have thought after what's happened the last 2 years, police shooting people with rubber bullets, businesses going under, et cetera, we would have had probably a bigger standing in South Australia than what we had a couple of weeks ago. Big turnout for the major parties. God knows why. I still get shocked at the fact they even got one single vote, to be brutally honest. But again, a lot of stupid people out there that don't know what they're voting for. So how do you see this playing out, again, at the federal level in the next coming months, and then also again in the Victorian election? Is Daniel Andrews still popular? We know he spends millions of dollars on his public, his image. He remembers how he fell down the stairs, but he doesn't remember about hotel quarantine and selective memory and so forth. How do you see it playing out at the next 2 elections?
Yeah, so I think different states had different COVID experiences. In South Australia, it was relatively controlled. They had less outbreaks, less lockdowns. They never had police attacking crowds. And so there were a bunch of South Australians who were all right with how the government ran it. Obviously, a bunch of them weren't happy with the government full stop and voted Labor. And some of that would have been a COVID protest. And obviously we saw in WA when they had their election in the height of the COVID panic, where they had the borders shut and Mark McGowan was saving them all. They got the massive landslide win. It's not going to be the same story in Victoria because so many people were so damaged by the lockdowns. So many people experienced the crackdown by the police, firing on crowds. All the extraordinary stuff that's happened in the last 2 years in Victoria, it has created a whole bunch of newly awake and activist people. People who never paid attention to politics before are now watching Parliament sit and paying attention. All the people who are not vaccinated, the 5% of the population that are not vaccinated, who are still locked out of employment, lost their jobs, lost their houses. Those who haven't left Victoria are angrily hanging around to have a conversation with Dan in November. So it's different for each state. I think federally, the coalition are in trouble, and part of that's because of their complicitness in the lockdowns. I think in Victoria, Labor is still quite popular in the city. All the public servants who were got to work from home, got the pay rises, and their life actually got better during lockdown, are probably still going to vote Labor. they will lose votes. They'll probably lose votes in their heartland, all the traditional Labor suburbs, who are the people who are affected most by lockdowns. I'd be surprised if they lose government. I'd love to see it happen, but the Libs are pretty pathetic down here, and Andrews is still popular. So they'll lose seats. It might be a close election, but I'd struggle to see them actually losing.
You just have to wonder what they have to do to not be elected again. It beggars belief, Tim. It really does. I just can't believe it.
Well, they've been in power down here so long now, 18 of the last 22 years, and they've infiltrated the public service, they've infiltrated the police force, they've infiltrated the judiciary, they've infiltrated the media. It's full of Labor activists, so to actually tip them out becomes increasingly unlikely. And then look at the Libs, who are just pathetic. I mean, Matthew Guy is a step up from the previous person, who no one remembers his name, but the Libs are still, they're not the first 11. They're playing a third-rate team mostly, and they're almost content and consigned to opposition forever. It's not like they almost have no desire to win. And obviously the solution is voting for minor parties. I think we are probably not going to, at the point we're going to win lower house seat yet, but you never know with preferences. If everyone's seen Topher's Marble video of how to vote for the freedom-friendly minor parties, if people preference each other, there's a chance to take lower house seats. But certainly in the upper house, we have a good shot of taking quite a chunk.
Well, we've seen down there they've got a ad campaign trying to boost the police's image, saying along the lines of, you shouldn't be hitting females and all that sort of stuff, and then a lot of the news outlets are showing what they did to females during the actual lockdowns. And I think a lot of people do have still have a lot of bad memories of that. So let's hope that sort of attitude flows through to the election. Because as we all know, Daniel Andrews owns the police force, and allegedly, and let's just hope all that sentiment flows through, because people aren't forgetting that.
It's extraordinary. We've just seen the Victorian Fit Poll saying, "Oh, we're going to do a rebranding to restore public trust in us," and I'm just going with it. No, some people who are attacked by crowd, people who are in the crowds got arrested, people who got pepper sprayed, people who were assaulted. They're not going to trust the police ever again. The Victorian police, in the eyes of hundreds of thousands, if not millions of Victorians, have dropped right down, and you can't build that back overnight. You probably can't build that back like generations to restore their trust, because we've just lost it.
Yeah, I don't think it's coming back anytime soon. And I think that's most police forces around the states. They've lost a lot of trust. There was a lot of good police as well that did do the right thing, and but unfortunately, the bad eggs are always the ones that people remember.
Yeah, and again in Victoria, it was much harsher than anywhere else in Australia. We had police were literally fighting the protesters, attacking them, running them down with horses, slamming them into the concrete, kicking them in the head.
The old lady as well. Yeah,
I still reckon the best one was the Sydney one, where they said he hit the horse, but you could tell he was sort of pushing it away. And then the police, about 24 hours later, put a picture of the horse with its head sticking out of the horse cart, saying, "Well, here's the horse." And it's just like, this is the stupidest thing I've ever seen. But anyway, what we're going to do first, before we do that, we're going to give people a shout out. So if you've got any questions, I guess for Tim, you can put them in the comment section. Aaron will probably get some and read, or collate a few. All right, who we got? Let's do the roll call. We've got Angel, Brandon. We've got Carlton, East Outdoors, Cliff Lee, Colin Pedfold, Dank Bloke, Fox 86, Front Toward Enemy, Harps 666, Jack Daniels, Mad Outdoors Adventures, Matt Rumsey. Mr. Wonderful's back after last week. Good to see you back. He didn't take us too seriously, which is wonderful. And AKA Mr. Wonderful. Mr. John Boy 1965, the NSC, Neil H, Neil Blackwell, Peter from the NSC, Phil Walder, Phil Westling, Rob's Woodworking, Ronnie Blackhawk, Salty Skippy, another good name, Southern Star Review. You can check out his YouTube channel as well. Steve Savick, Bushranger Brotherhood of Victoria, Tracer123, Tube User C1, Vegas AB, Vitrix 300, and Wilbur. Sorry if anyone hasn't commented, because it's just that's all that's coming up in my participants list. Aaron.
Yeah, so Tim, you are a member of the NSC, of course.
Yep.
And that's how we got hold of you through the NSC, who are actually a sponsor tonight, as everyone knows. So please sign up to join the NSC. They are your genuine reason for your firearms in Victoria, New South Wales, and Queensland, and hopefully a few other states coming soon, hopefully. So the NFA, yes or no? What's your feelings? Just go nuts. Tell us all about it and what you think.
All right. So, not a fan. I've never been a supporter of it. And I was saying to you guys earlier, when I was at university, I was a member of the Liberal Party. I joined student clubs and campaigned in '93 for Houston and '96 for Howard. And then along came the NFC, all the issues that happened, Port Arthur and so on, and the crackdown on firearms. And I tore up my party membership at that point. I couldn't support their crackdown on firearms. I guess you could describe me as a Second Amendment kind of firearms owner or believer. I think we have a right to own firearms for self-defense and for a whole bunch of other purposes. And the government shouldn't be infringing that. And it's a extraordinary thing that the government will take them away from us. And even at the time we had all this, Australia's never had a firearms culture. Bullshit. I grew up in a firearms culture, on a farm with firearms. My father gave me an old 22. I say it was my 6th birthday. He said it was my 8th birthday. But anyway, I got a little old single shot 22 that his father had given him when he was a kid. And he gave it to me on my birthday. And I grew up shooting rabbits and so on with that. And firearms were a part of my life. And to say that we didn't have a firearms culture is complete rubbish. We absolutely did, at least in regional Australia. So maybe not in the cities, people were disconnected from it. But for regional Australia, we absolutely had a firearms culture. I support the right to own firearms. I think we should get our semi-automatics back, and we should scrap the NFC, NFA, sorry. But obviously that's a long and hard fight to get there. But it's rubbish, it's nonsense. The firearms registries are no use. They cost money and do nothing. And we need to trust people with firearms. Governments should be a little bit afraid of the population, not disarming them and being able to control them.
Well, there you go, guys. No other politician I've ever heard in Australia has said get rid of the NFA and we should be able to defend ourselves. So, guys, if your so-called pro-gun members aren't saying this sort of stuff, they ain't pro-gun in my book. So, well done, Tim. You're the first one I've ever heard in 25 years say that. It should be gone.
I think, and that's not necessarily a popular idea in the cities, but there are a bunch of people in Australia who believe that, and that view should be represented. Absolutely.
Yeah, that is.
What
awesome.
about? Let me say one thing from Steve said. What are your I know this probably goes to more of the, I guess, splashing cash. He said, what are your thoughts on the Parler party and how that's going to, or UAP, I guess, how's that going to throw things in the works? You know, Parler, obviously, we know has got a lot of money to splash around. You know, other parties obviously don't, being LDP, One Nation, you know, a couple of these other minor parties, the Australian Party or Ricardo Bossi or whatever they're called, you know what I mean? But I mean, the sort of serious contenders really, I think, for this election, you know, for the minor parties, especially on the, I wouldn't say centre, but, centre right, you might say. I guess Libertarian falls in many different spectrums, but, you know, LDP, One Nation and UAP, probably the, top sort of three. So how's that going to factor in, you think? I mean, when they're splashing cash around?
So it's going to depend on states. Obviously, One Nation will do quite well in Queensland and less well around the rest of the country. I think United Australia Party have probably, despite what Palmer spends on it, they've probably done their dash. They did quite well the first time they ran, but not so well in subsequent elections. And I think, despite the fact that they're spending a lot of money and running a lot of candidates, I don't think they'll do that well this time around, and I suspect they won't get people elected. But I mean, we have to wait and see for the election to know for sure. I think Lib Dems will do well in Victoria, where we have a presence, and if Lib Dems get one senator up, it will be David Limbrick here in Victoria, who's my fellow Victorian Upper House MP here, who's been very strong against the lockdowns. I suspect, we get One Nation up in Queensland, but you don't know. We could get One Nation and Lib Dems. Campbell Newman is running in Queensland, and has a level of popularity up there. We'll see. We have Topher running in Tasmania, and so that you never know what's going to happen. It's conceivable we could get 3 or 4 MPs. It's conceivable we could get 1 or maybe none. I suspect One Nation will get 1 in Queensland, and I don't know about United Australia Party at all. Australia One are not registered as a party, and the thing's closed, so they're not going to be running. So you can't vote for them. So pick another party instead. But the main thing is as Topher said in his Marble video, preference all the freedom-friendly minor parties. If you're pro-firearms, the Dems are the obvious choice. I'm not sure how pro-firearms UAP or One Nation are, but I'm not here to diss other parties. Let them make their own case. I'd say vote whichever political party you like. Vote them 1 and vote the next one 2, next one 3, especially for the Senate, which is the most important place where we're going to take seats. Lower house seats are long shots, but the Senate seats are almost locked. At least some of them will go to some of those centre-right parties.
We've played a few videos in the past of a couple of parties in their talking about guns, and it's not favourable at all. So, yeah, what people think are pro-gun people aren't really pro-gun people.
Yeah, we've got Aaron's disappeared there for a second. Yeah, let me read this one because I wanted to find this one interesting. Hang on, I wanted this one because I was just looking. That's a good point actually. So you're probably reading that one. So we obviously know David Leyonhjelm was pretty good in regards to being in a federal senator. So I've just check while I was you answer a few questions there. There is no mention, at least that I can see right now. It's a bit convoluted, the website. So we know your stance, but I mean, why would we remove something from the website? So I've got to throw you a bit of a curveball here. How can your stance might be good, but what is the stance of the party? We can't be, one person saying one thing. We've got to have a united stand that, fight. It doesn't mean we go out there and blurt it from the rooftops at every press conference because you've got a lot of different policies. But, how can we be sure that what you're saying, again, is going to be, in line with what, I guess federally they're going to do in New South Wales, different states. I know you're from Victoria, but we need a united stand on this issue.
Yeah, and it's disappointing to me. The party pulled down all the policies, and if you go back on the Wayback Machine a few years, on the internet, you can actually go back to see previous things. We actually have 100 policies in a whole bunch of areas that we've built up over the last 20 years as a party. They've all been taken on the website, and everything is just on the Freedom Manifesto, 10 policies to save Australia. And the whole idea was to just focus all attention on these current issues and policies. Having said that, I think absolutely there's an element of people in the party who want to downplay the firearms policy. Again, generally city people, some of our new incoming members are not that keen on it. It's an issue. I'm quite aware of it. As long as I'm around, as long as I even say that, these policies will stay. I know for sure that David Limbrick, my colleague, will also support our policies as they stand. The party policies have not changed. They exist. They've been voted on by the members, and they might be off the website now, but they're still there. They're still our policies. And as far as I'm concerned, they will remain as long as I'm in the party. And I would be very, very disappointed if anything changed in the future along that line, because they are very important to me. It's one of the major reasons I joined the party in the first place. So,
because I would say if they're, if we're pro freedom, that includes the rights of good people, as you said earlier, to keep, use and own firearms for hunting and sporting activities. I mean, that would go hand in hand. So I think if there's any candidates that really are against it, well, they're not really, I would think, freedom orientated, libertarian, whatever you'd like to call it, because we've seen a lot of, and we had this discussion last week. We sort of went off a bit half-cocked last week about, I'm conservative, libertarian, you might say. But I'd never vote for the Liberal Party because they took our firearms in 1996. I think their management of the last 2 years has been poor. And frankly, I hope Scott Morrison's going to lose. Hopefully the Liberal Party might actually learn, instead of being closer to the Liberal Party. And the good term people are bringing up is, Liberal and Labor are two different wings of the same bird. But at the end of the day, they've got to be punished for their poor stance on a lot of different issues over the last 2 years. So, and I guess it goes back to my question. Sorry if I've missed it here, from Vitrix 300. Some people were slightly happy, not Queenslanders, obviously, during the tenure of Campbell Newman joining the LDP. So I guess he's asking, is Campbell Newman a Liberal Democrat? Yes, he is. People are concerned. People from Liberal Party are coming into parties like the LDP, and the issues surrounding the Liberal Party and the things they do, and not really being centrist, moving further towards the left.
So I think the Libs who are coming to us are the ones who are being spat out by the Liberal Party because they're moving to the left. But having said that, it is an issue. I've been interviewing candidates in Victoria for the federal election, and I've asked every one of them about the firearms, their views on firearms. Surprisingly large number of them have said, I wasn't pro-firearms until I saw what happened to the Victorian government locking us down, and now I understand. I got that response quite a few times. So I've certainly not supported candidates who were not pro-firearms. It's a challenge. We have a whole bunch of new members, and our party, it's extraordinary. We've been a small party. In the last 2 years, we signed up 15,000 new members, and of that, more than half that was in Victoria. And so I guess I should really thank Dan Andrews for giving our party a real boost. But there will be challenges in that not all these people who joined us are committed libertarians. They're just there because they want an end to the vaccine mandates and the lockdowns and government overreach. And so we have a effort we have to go out to our members to push freedom ideas and show them it's not just one area, it's across the whole board on every issue. The government shouldn't tell us what to do with our lives. Freedom is for everything, not just for lockdowns. So it's a challenge for us, but we'll face it. As far as I'm concerned, the policies are very much firearms policies are still there, and everyone who's running as a candidate is committed to them.
Well, Campbell Newman did actually help Queenslanders out shooters quite a bit up here. He did get rid of he put a like-to-like swaps for firearms, so no PTAs, same caliber and action. You can just take your gun in and swap it over at a gun shop for another one without any PTAs or anything. He did that. And there was a story going out that he was trying to get pistols on private land for hunting. Now, that's something that I think is very important. We have police ministers and that saying we're not going to be a bunch of cowboys and all that running around with firearms, with pistols like the Wild West, but that's not exactly how it works. It's a safety thing and a humanitarian thing to put down injured animals, because as you know, when you go hunting, not every animal is a kill shot. Sometimes it just doesn't work out like that, and it's a lot safer to put them down with a 9mm pistol or a 22 pistol than it would be blasting away with a 30-06 at point blank range, which is a lot more dangerous. So there was a story that he was thinking of bringing that in. I don't know if that's true. I've never spoken to him. It would be interesting to actually speak to him at some stage and get his views on some of these things that we've heard. But yeah, he was a friend of firearms up here, and I actually didn't mind the guy.
And so I've only spoken to Campbell a couple of times. He's very, very intense. He's very focused and intense. I'm a little bit more laid back, so we probably have a personality clash. We had to work together all the time. But I certainly hope that he's also very good at firearms. But anyway, I remain that.
It's good. I mean, I like the things you've been saying in Parliament. I guess the main concern of shooters is having shows like this. I've done podcasts in the past with many different pro-gun politicians, Malcolm Roberts, David Lionhelm, Aaron Stonehouse from WA, Shooters and Fishers at some stage as well. I guess, what people don't like is being told one thing on a stream like this and then them to do another when it comes to radio, TV, because it's bad. I mean, we just saw someone in the chat here mention, I quite like Pauline. I think she's an unassuming politician. She's a bit rough around the edges. I do like that. But people say, well, she's got a pistol license. She's pro-shooting. But then there was that whole NRA debacle, where she said, well, we weren't with the NRA, even though they got caught on video they were, and then proceeded to throw shooters under the bus. So all we're hoping from this, Tim, is that, we say what we do and say what we mean, not only in Parliament, but, obviously on streams like this, and when it actually counts in media and radio, not just to, get votes on streams like this or podcasts. So, and you seem to be doing that, so that's good then.
Yeah, and it is. But let's be honest, even we try and narrowcast the firearm stuff. We don't try and go out to the age and say, yes, we're pro-guns. We try and keep the message focused, because we will lose votes if that's very public. So everyone does it, including us. But I'm very committed to it. I just didn't necessarily run around telling everyone all the time that I'm committed to it. But I'll stand up in Parliament to push firearms issues. I won't back away from it, but I'm also not running around waving like a big banner in public. So I guess
you got to find medium ground, sort of, don't you?
Yeah.
And that sort of answers the question here from Retro. Tim, if Victorians were to vote for you, are you going to go above and beyond like the NSC has for shooters? But I think you pretty much have answered that yourself. You're very pro-gun and you want to get rid of the NFA, and you've been up in Parliament, and I've seen a few of your speeches. You're standing up for shooters. It was fantastic.
Absolutely, we continue to work with the NSC to come up with questions and things to stand up for shooters in Parliament. I'm just for a second, I'm going to invite David Liberick. He just came into my office looking for a glass of wine. So
I've got a glass. I'm
going to bring him into the
I don't
camera.
even know who I'm talking to.
He doesn't need the glass. He just needs the wine. He just needs the wine.
Yeah.
G'day, David.
David, he's our lead Senate candidate. He just finished his YouTube podcast next door.
Yeah, it was a live stream for the party. Yeah.
So
can they hear me? They probably can't.
Yeah, can hear you.
Yeah,
All right. Hi, everyone.
I can't hear them, but I can hear you.
Okay.
So this is David. He's running for the Senate, and he will also stand firm on firearms. He's not a shooter himself, but he will follow the party policy.
Two of my sons are, though.
Yeah. Of
Good.
all the people during the pandemic, in the last 2 years that were standing up, you're on the floor of Parliament. You even you didn't want to give him your vax status too, which I agree with. I mean, whether we are or aren't, that's not for anybody to say whether we are or aren't. We don't discriminate, but again, the Andrews government trying everything they can to exclude people that no doubt people in this stream a couple of years ago, 2018, would have voted for you guys. Basically. Democracy wasn't there, was it? Well, it hasn't been there for the last 2 years anyway. But, again, trying to exclude people that have been voted for, MPs, out of Parliament.
Oh, that was extraordinary. And it's something we haven't seen in our Westminster system since the Cromwell's revolution in Britain in the 1600s. The MPs being suspended from Parliament for their political views. It was absolutely extraordinary. But the mandate lockdowns, the mandates where people can't work, can't do anything without showing their vaccine status is also extraordinary. It's not something from a liberal Western democracy. It's something from a fascist or communist, totalitarian dictatorship. So I've never made a secret of the fact that I am vaccinated. And I supported vaccination because I think vaccines in general are a good thing. But once they started mandating it, I said, I'm off this bandwagon altogether. You can't do that. It's extraordinary. It's wrong. And we refused to hand our papers in, and they excluded us from Parliament. And then we did our show from a nightclub. So we actually got to participate in Parliament they thought they'd locked us out, but they didn't realise that they'd changed the rules a few weeks earlier to let MPs participate remotely. So we set up in Chase Lounge in Melbourne, the nightclub. And we actually participated there and completely really annoyed Labor then when that happened. Anyway, in the end, we handed our papers in because we wanted to come back to vote against the pandemic extension legislation. Otherwise, we'd probably still be sitting out of Parliament now as a matter of principle.
It's a shame you're forced to do that. Now, lighten the mood
just
a little bit.
Aaron, you missed a super chat there from that bushranger again.
I
don't know what this means.
we'll be bringing that up in a second. But we'll like to talk about something. I guess it was not funny at the time, but you got to have a bit of a giggle now. You and David Limerick having the SWAT team and police sent on you by someone. I'm sure everyone can guess who did it. When you're on the Parliament steps, standing up for the everyday citizen. So run us through that little scenario.
So we come to Parliament for the week, and then the government had cancelled Parliament and said you can't sit in Parliament because COVID is cancelled. So we said, well, if we can't sit in Parliament, we'll go and sit on the steps. And so the government had just brought in they're closing the playgrounds to children. Basically, Dan Andrews was furious that parents were taking the kids to the park and then they were talking to each other, and people were challenging his authority. And so he brought in a ban on playgrounds on this completely spurious grounds that kids are infecting other kids. It was not a single case of someone being affected outside at the time. It was complete rubbish. There's no science behind it. So, but Dan Andrews said, you won't defy my authority. I'm going to close the playgrounds. So David and I took some signs out onto the steps of the Parliament and saying, open the playgrounds, let kids play. And we sat there in our chairs for a few hours, and the police got absolutely agitated about it. We had because Melbourne was in lockdown at the time and no one was allowed to protest. And we were sitting there after about an hour. We just started noticing police circling. It went from 2 to 5 to 15 to 30, and these police cars kept rolling up, and people kept building up on the edges of the steps. And the police were getting ready to arrest us. And they can't do that in a Westminster democracy for two reasons. One, you can't interfere with a member of Parliament going about their parliamentary business. That goes right back to Cromwell, and before that, the King trying to crack down on Parliament. It's very well established part of common law that MPs cannot be impeded to do their parliamentary work. But secondly, on the parliamentary grounds, the government has no authority. Police can't come onto parliamentary grounds and do stuff. It's not their zone. They have to be invited in. So MPs on parliamentary grounds doing something, it would be truly extraordinary for MPs to be arrested. But they were getting set to do it. And I messaged the clerk of the Parliament to say, what's your position on MPs being arrested on the steps? And he came running out of the building, and it was quite funny to watch. And he was talking to the senior police officer there and saying, this is this is way beyond your pay grade. You're going to lose if you arrest these MPs. You're going to lose your job on this. And they buzzed around and they kept building up numbers for a bit longer after that. And there was a lot of angry conversations and conferences and going and coming. But in the end, they went away again. So they accepted that they had no authority there. We were planning to stay out there all night, possibly all day next day as well. But then a lot of people started coming past and giving us gifts and food and things and coming to talk to us. And there was going to be a curfew coming in at 9 o'clock. And when the curfew came in, the police would have been arresting everyone who came past. And we thought this is going to be bad for these people because we're protected, but they're not. So we pulled the pin on the protest a bit before 9 o'clock. Went in. But anyway, that was also an interesting thing where the Vic poll found that they actually have limits on their authority as regards MPs.
Yeah, well, we've seen and it brings up a good point, that front toward enemy. There's no separation of power anymore, between the government, police, etc. So it's quite, and I'll go as far as to say, democracy is being compromised in the court system too. People say, well, that's the one and only thing, but we've seen that's not been the case either. Where things have been, going, whatever they want them to. So people, you only got to read it on the internet and on a lot of the social media. People saying, well, what's the point of sending it to the court? The courts have got no guts anyway.
Yeah, and we see in Victoria where Labor have stacked the courts with their appointees. People who are former Labor Party candidates or Labor Party members. So when the government's been in for so long as Labor have in Victoria, they just roll their own people into everywhere, and it's a problem. But we've got the High Court as well. We've seen that federally. They've been not willing to defend freedom with the closing of the borders. I was shocked and horrified at the fact that the Constitution our Australian Constitution is rubbish and gives us very few rights at all. But one of those rights is the right to move between states freely for business or other reasons. And the fact that the High Court is perfectly happy to close our borders like they did, which being an MP who lives in a border city between Victoria and New South Wales, that was a massive disruption to our life there. But the High Court just said, yeah, go ahead, we don't care. You have a reason. It's not, you're not allowed to do it to restrict trade, but you can do it for any other reason you like. That appalled me and disappointed me a lot. And I have much less trust in the court system after the last 2 years than I had before.
Now, this is something that you and me talked about on the phone last night that I found quite interesting. So thank you very much, Bush Ranger, Brotherhood of Australia, for the super chat. Tim, is the new state/territory still a project being worked on? Yeah, this is very interesting. So explain.
I don't even know what that even means, to be honest.
The short answer is yes. So in my maiden speech in Parliament, when I was elected in 2018, I talked about Brexit, was the idea of breaking away a new state from regional Victoria and regional New South Wales. Because a massive problem for regional Australians is that our cities are now, the weight of populations in the city, in people who not in the country, never been in the country, a lot of them, they think national parks are lovely, but they've never been to a national park, they've never been outside the city, and they never will. But these are the people that now run Australia. 3/4 of the Victorian population now live in Greater Melbourne. And same story in Sydney, between Sydney, Newcastle, and Wollongong, that's 80% of the population of New South Wales. And the same story in other states as well, to greater or lesser extents. 75% of the population of WA live in Perth. The regional areas get screwed, and it's all the government spending is the government takes taxes from all over the states, and they spend them in the capital cities. They employ the public service there, they build the hospitals and the facilities there, and they basically the rest of the state gets sucked dry. And it's a cascading effect. The more you build in Melbourne, the more pressure you make for people to come to Melbourne. The more jobs that go there, the more money that goes there, the more resources that go there. The rest of the states get sucked dry. So the idea of Brexit was to create a new state where we cut out Greater Melbourne, which Melbourne and Geelong and surrounding areas, and we cut out Sydney, Greater Sydney, with Newcastle, Sydney, Wollongong, a big circle around that, make them separate states on their own and combine the rest into one single large rural state with 2 million plus people, with a very viable economy, and with control of our own areas. It makes sense economically for regional areas. It makes sense on a whole bunch of levels. One of the ways it makes sense is freedom focused. People in the cities are not, people growing up in regional areas are more focused on freedom and not being controlled by government. But whereas people in the city just being controlled by people is just normal part of life. If we ever want to make movement on firearms, it's a state level issue. It's never going to happen while we're attached to the city. The people in the city are not going to support changes to the NFA. It's just not going to happen. We get to create a new state. We get to write new laws for the regional areas. We get to sign up or not sign up to the NFA as it exists or negotiate changes. We get to write a whole new state constitution where we can include actual rights, which is something that no one in Australia has at the moment. And I think we can look at the US Constitution for some of the rights we might want to include in a new state constitution. So anyway, the idea is we won't be free while we're hooked up to the city. We will be poor. We'll be kept as serfs. The only way that regional Australia will get ahead is by decoupling their economy and their politics from the cities. And a new state in regional Victoria is absolutely viable. Regional Victoria and New South Wales together combined, absolutely viable, can go, and it should go, and it will go. It's just going to take an effort. I always thought it should happen, even when I was young. When I first read the Australian Constitution and realised that it included a mechanism for making new states, I thought, that's great, we should do that. At some point after I was elected, I realised that actually I'm someone with power who will actually start to make this happen. So I'm pushing the idea. It won't be easy. We have to get support in all the regional areas for the idea. but it can absolutely happen. We also need a new state in North Queensland. Absolutely the same issue. The rest of Australia has the same issue as well, but their regional populations are even smaller and harder to push. But anyway, Brexit.
I'd move to those pro-firearm states for sure. Hey, just a quick one. 15 minutes left. So Stephen says, hey, Tim, is there going to be a how to vote card? I presume they'll be voting, advice, obviously not yet prior to the election and stuff like that. I'm guessing. We'll
absolutely do it, and we'll put it online. And this election will actually have people standing at some polling booths to hand them out. In the past, it's something we've been lacking is actually members. Like I said earlier, we have 15,000 new members, so we actually have supporters handing out how to vote. But at the end of the day, how your preference is entirely up to you. You don't have to pay attention to what anyone puts on a how to vote card. You do it yourself. You work out which parties you like. I think Lib Dem should be your number one, and then you pick your number 2s, 3s, 4, 5. Put all the major parties last or nearly last. Greens last, Labor, Liberal, in that order perhaps, or whatever you like. I don't care. As long as you put the freedom-friendly minor parties high and us first, that would be ideal.
Here we go. Got another curveball for you. So why should people vote for the LDP as opposed to, other pro-firearms parties? I mean, Shooters and Fishers obviously being one of them. You've got Jeff Borman in Parliament down there as well. I use pro.
That
pro
pays it all.
Sorry, yeah, I use pro-gun loosely to a certain degree. So why should they vote for you and not other parties? Obviously, your history's been good the last 2 years, which is fantastic. See, for me and Aaron have said this for a while now, that it's much more. We were purely firearms voting, and then this election, I'm voting for freedom and firearms as well, probably equal. So, why should they vote for you guys down there and not other pro-gun parties?
Yeah. So look, I don't get into fights with SFFP. If people want to vote for them, they will vote for them, and a bunch of shooters will vote for them no matter what they do and what they stand for. That's great. Preference us number 2 if that's what you want. I think we're the better pro-firearms party, and we support going back to the 96 firearms rules. So if you're very keen shooter and want that to happen, we're the party for you. But I don't care if you vote Shooters, Farmers, Fishers and preference us second. That's fine. I don't care if you vote United Australia Party and preference us second. That's fine. Just make sure you get the preferences flowing. I believe we're the best party, but you don't have to believe that. Just give us a preference.
Yep. Well, all right, maybe we'll do some rapid fire questions. So while Aaron's going to do that, just put some questions, guys, in the comments, and we'll try and do some rapid fire, quick question answers. Hopefully, some good ones, guys, so that are consistent. I noticed a lot of people talking about federal. He's a state member, so it's a little bit different, obviously. So if you can, put some stuff down there for some quick rapid fire questions, that'd be good. So we can, do some rapid fire stuff for the last 10 minutes. So let us know in the comments. Put your questions there for Tim.
Here's the thing I do get asked about. You don't have to name names or anything, Tim, but I get asked about, are there pro-gun politicians in Parliament that enjoy shooting in the firearms, but they refuse to stand up for shooters and they just hide and cower, basically because they just want to keep their jobs, but they don't have a backbone and they won't, like you, they won't stand up for us. So are there politicians you know of that are gun owners and enjoy shooting and hunting but won't help us out?
Almost certainly there are. I don't know about lower house MPs. I haven't got much to do with them, only the upper house MPs. I know there's a couple of Labor MPs who enjoy duck hunting and so on. And I would assume they push these ideas behind the scenes, but they certainly don't stand up in public and push it hard. I know we have 1 or 2 Liberal MPs who are pro-firearms publicly. Whether there are others who are not, I don't know. But again, it comes back to the Brexit idea. Most of them are based in Melbourne. Most Liberal Party, most Labor Party MPs are in the city. They want to appeal to city voters, and they don't want to put up ideas that will turn them off. And so we have Liberal MPs standing up in Parliament. They're making speeches saying we should ban duck hunting. That's extraordinary. And the fact the party pre-selects them and then lets them get away, that kind of thing. That's nonsense. So I assume there are a handful of MPs there who are pro-firearms who don't stand up for them. But
Can't really be much of a person if you can't
Rapid
stand up for
fire
your
here,
beliefs.
one for you. Tim,
Please.
suppressors. Yeah, good one. I mean, I
Yeah.
did an interview with Bridget McKenzie probably two and a half years ago and promised she was, bringing legislation to the floor of Parliament. Me and Aaron laughed about it a little bit. She contacted me to do the interview, actually, which is quite surprising. Suppressors probably, I think, would probably be one of the, I won't say easier, because if it was easy, we would have had it by now, but one of the probably topics that would probably come up first as a bit of a test case, you might say. So, good for hearing, good for ranges, stop noise. I mean, yes or no? What do you think?
Absolutely, yes. I'm a big fan of it. I haven't seen a suppressor personally. I'd be interested in actually seeing them. Generally, you have to have a firearm that's fitted for a screw. Anyway, but I'm absolutely in favour. It's a OH&S issue. Shooters shouldn't have to put up with having to cover their ears. I have some industrial deafness, probably partly from having firearms go off unexpectedly when I was out spotlighting and not having my ears covered properly. It should be. We should have suppressors do it. They're obviously not a real crime issue or anything else. It's just a safety issue. I would support that. We may put that up at some point. If not in this parliamentary term, next parliamentary term, I will get to it. It's absolutely on my do list. Having said that, it's unlikely we push it through because all the pre-mentioned city MPs who would vote against it. But
Mr. Wonderful says, Tim, you got respect just for appearing here and spelling out your beliefs. Salty Skippy said, Tim, what's the best way to vote to ensure CCP's Dan's removal? The state can't survive another 4 years. So just a quick rapid fire response.
Well, if you want Labor to lose, put Labor last. It's very simple. Number all your boxes and put Labor at the end of it.
As we always say, I vote Liberal last because of what happened in 96. But if I was in Victoria, guys, I'd be brutally honest. That's where I would change it up. It'd be Labor last, followed by the Greens, then the Liberals. But if I'm not in Victoria, for me, it's Liberal last, Greens, then Labor. Again, for obvious reasons about the major gun bans that have happened in Australia.
I've always put Greens last, but Labor last in Victoria. I could absolutely understand that. Look, and we might do deals with Labor and preference them ahead of Liberals somewhere. I don't know if we will, or I'd hate to think it. If we do that and you don't like it, don't follow the vote, how to vote card in those seats. I'd be very happy if Labor's last everywhere.
Yeah. Matt Outdoors says appearance laws. Would you get rid of those? I'm pretty sure you would, wouldn't you?
Absolutely.
What the gun looks like.
That's a big thing that I'm a fan of. It doesn't matter what it looks like. That's just complete nonsense. Appearance laws should just go. And that's one of the things we've talked about putting a motion up on. And we might do that before the end of this term.
And you want airsoft as well to come into Australia?
Absolutely. Legalise airsoft, gel blasters, paintball. They should all be legal without. You shouldn't have a license.
No, we can own a real gun, but we can't own one that shoots little plastic balls for fun like paintball. This is just madness.
Yeah, this is why we're laughing stock around the world. I talked to a lot of people around the world through the show about firearms, and Australia, just not in firearms, is regarded a bit of a joke in the international arena about some of their crazy laws. Now, this is interesting. It's what we spoke about before. Thank you, N8M8H8 for a super chat. I spoke to Cameron Newman a while back, and he confirmed that he tried to get handgun use on private land. Well, that's fantastic.
Hey, when you were asking about who the shooters were before in Victorian Parliament, I guess it's not Andy Medic. I guess it's not Fiona Patton. And I guess it's not Samantha Ratnam. I guess it's not Ratnam either, is it? So
it seems very unlikely. Yes.
So we've got 5 minutes to go.
One last quick question. I've got a quick one. You mentioned a bit earlier, duck hunting. I'm a big fan of duck hunting. I hunt on the rice fields of New South Wales pretty much I have for the last decade, since 2011. This was just 10 years last year. Every November I go for a week or two. Let's be honest here. There's a lot of pressure on duck hunting. We all know it. Do you think it's on the chopping block or no?
Potentially it is. There's a growing pressure in the cities to ban it by people who've never been in the regional areas. And we have to hold the line here because once that goes, they'll be pushing for every other kind of shooting as well. The salami tactics. They take small slices at a time. Once duck hunting goes, it'll be deer hunting. It'll be shooting feral animals. They'll go one step at a time. But yes, it's absolutely at risk, and we need to stand back and push hard if we want to keep it. And everyone who's not a duck hunter has to do it as well, because if once duck hunting goes, everything else will fall as well.
Yeah. Just a quick, sorry, let me say one more because I've got a good one here, Aaron. Sorry, from Mr. Wonderful said, because this is what we were talking about last week as well. I mean, it's I think it's highly likely ScoMo's finished. So we saw the ousting of the South Australian Premier gone as well. If New South Wales falls, that means really we're only left with Tasmania. Goodwin just retired a couple of days ago. Maybe the next year year to 2 years, we could be looking at basically Australia completely from state to federal, run by Labor. So what he said, sorry, it's just disappeared here. Let me just go back up. What are the consequences of an upper and lower house federal and every mainland state Labor government?
It would be very unfortunate. One thing is with Australian voters is they tend not to vote the same parties in both houses. There's a chunk of people who vote against that. So if Labor win the federal election, there'll be a bunch of, when the Victorian election comes up, there'll be some people who won't vote Labor just because of that. That's a tradition. So it's actually a good sign for booting down if the Labor lose if Liberal lose federally. If Labor get control of the lower houses, it's important that we don't get control of the upper houses, because as you see in WA, if they got control of both houses, they push through whatever they want. They reform the parliament. They're going to change the upper house voting system in WA and stop minor parties being elected there. They're going to push through gun laws without anything to stop them. So even if Labor get control of lower houses, do not vote for them in the upper house, for God's sake.
Yep. Well, from Brandon, he says, do we have an LDP in Wollongong? And he's going for his firearms license, which is good to see.
I'm sure we have Lib Dems in, and we say Lib Dems on LDP these days. We changed the branding. So we have Lib Dems in Wollongong. Whether we have I'm pretty sure we'll have candidates as well at the federal election, the state election. I have to check the website to be sure, but the party exists down there. We have branches, maybe a small branch there, but there will be something.
This is a good question. Why were pump actions banned if Martin Bryant didn't use one? Because remember, guys, if guns go bang, the politicians are scared. Just remember that.
Yeah. Well, that was all because they apparently it's a last-minute thing just before they're to vote on it. And John Howard slipped that in because the bad guys in movies use pump actions, and he doesn't like that.
They'd written that legislation ahead of time. It was there and sitting there, the gun bans. So what Martin Bryant did or didn't do is not really relevant. They had it waiting for when there was an issue so they could roll it out. And there's no logic behind our gun laws. Don't try and think there's logic. It's just guns are bad. So anything that can attack firearms is good. And no doubt we'll have a uptick on anniversaries of Port Arthur, 25 years, 30 years. There'll be another push to take more firearms away. Again, it's salami tactics, one slice at a time. We have to stop and push back each and every time, not give ground, because otherwise they'll keep taking them away till we're disarmed.
How do they? Just a quick one. Sorry, last one. Just because we're gonna. How do people help out? It's obviously going to need people on the ground. You're going to want them, handing out voter vote cards. You're going to want to help them, just be involved with the party. Become members. How are they going to be able to do that? Because obviously, people that are watching this stream, guys, you need to be out there if you want to vote for. You want to help out. How to get out there and man a polling booth in your area. So how do they do that?
So joining the party is easy, and we have non-financial membership. If you don't want to pay the money to be a member, you can still sign up as a member without paying money. Or you can just sign up as a volunteer, contacting our party office or our individual offices. People can contact my office in Wodonga as well if they want to participate. Getting involved. And everyone who's upset with what's happening in Australia now should join a party. I'd say join the Dems, but join a party, a minor party, and fight for something. Don't just let the major parties keep rolling on where we're going, because where we're going is not a good place. We need to push back. We're very happy to take volunteers and for the election coming up. But if not us, pick someone, because for God's sake, let's change the trajectory we're on, because otherwise it's going to be bad.
I know all parties too. People, I'll hear this a lot before we go. We talk about, preferences and stuff like that. I mean, sometimes I agree with preferences. People say, well, you can vote below the line and vote for who you want to vote for. That is true. But people, I think, sometimes go, well, I don't like that you're preferencing this party. I mean, I don't have a problem with it. I don't care if a party preferences the Greens, to be honest, because that means if they get elected, they've got more chance of doing stuff in Parliament. I know some people may disagree with that, but at the end of the day, these guys are there to try and be elected. But on the flip side, I don't like when parties say, well, you choose where your preferences go. While that's true, you also have the fact that most 90% of people vote above the line anyway. So that way the preference goes where the party wants it to go to. So, which is fine. I'm okay with that. But again, just to confirm, people say, oh, this party's working with Labor. They're working with this party. I mean, you guys got to do what you got to do to be elected at the end of the day. That's how politics works.
Yeah. And that's state. That's the Victorian state is the only one that still has the group voting tickets. And we do, and it's how I got elected. And we will do deals with other parties to make that happen again, and make sure see if we get some more Lib Dems up as well. Federally, they abolished that system. All the other states, they abolished that system now. You decide your own preference. You vote above the line. One thing they'll tell you in the federal election, you go to the polling booth, they'll say vote 1 to 6 above the line. No, vote at least 6. Vote 12, vote 18, vote the whole line above the line. It's not that hard to do that. You decide your preferences now, everywhere except Victoria. In Victoria, you still do it voting below the line. But yes, we'll do deals with parties to get us elected, and we'll do deals with the devil to get us
I'm going to struggle to pick 6 at the election, that's for sure. Six pro-freedom parties, that's going to be a bit of a stretch, isn't it?
Yeah, but there's only one so far. So,
but even if you can't decide between Liberal and Labor, which are worse, you should...
Well, hey, no one in this thread's voting Labor and Liberal. If you are, please leave the stream because this is not the stream for you. Anyway,
one person that is. So, just before we go, Tim, what would you like to say about firearms and a bit about yourself, or anything else you want to round up on? Any comments you want to say?
I think we've covered most of it here. Look, I like firearms. I've always liked firearms. We have a right to own firearms. It's not. People keep saying it's a privilege. It's not a privilege. We should have a right to defend ourselves, to own firearms. It doesn't matter what reason we want them. Stuff that. I want them. We should have them. Responsible adults should be trusted to do things. And I'm sick of this nanny state where we're told we can't do that. And I'm very happy to say that. Otherwise, look, Lib Dems, we're a pro-freedom party. It's not just firearms. Firearms are just one very small part of our platform. We support freedom in a whole bunch of areas, and that'll be scary for some people. A lot of people think, I want freedom in my particular area, but I don't want everyone else to have freedom. No, we want everyone to have freedom. The government, pull the government back, make the government small. Some people said that make the government small enough you could drown it in a bathtub. They should have less money and less power over our lives, and we should be free to make our own choices. And if we make bad choices, well, that's on us. We don't need the government to be our mother or our father. We can choose for ourselves. Anyway, so Lib Dems, vote 1 everywhere and anywhere.
Yeah. Let me say one last thing. After 2 years, if you're not voting for these guys and you're in Victoria, I don't know where you guys have been. I mean, it's just shocking if you don't vote for these guys come November. Well, not just November, but in the federal election too. I mean, you've heard it here. So, are you really going to get any better representation? If you think there is, by all means, vote for them, but you're just going to be kidding yourself. So,
if you think you do, tell us.
Yeah. But if you're going to vote for someone else, preference us next. So, that's how preferences work.
We'll preferably put them number 1. Preferably put them as number 1, not 2. All right, that's it.
Well, thank you so much, guys. Really do appreciate it. Thank you so much, Tim. We'll definitely be happy to have you back to talk about some more topics. I've got a whole list of topics here to talk about that I didn't get to. But thank you so much, Tim. Thank you, Jason.
Thanks a lot for having me on.
Anytime. It was a pleasure. Thank you so much. And good night, everyone. Have a great week and safe week. And I hope you all get out and do some shooting. Take care, guys. And thank you very much.
See ya.